at Kilroy Travel Festival 2021. I'm your moderator for this final session. My name is Mirza, and I will try and guide you through this very, very interesting session, which is LGBTQ plus travel. So a bit of housekeeping rules before we get started. If you have any questions, comments, or anything like that, feel free to use chat, and we'll get back to you. There will also be a WhatsApp number posted where you can also post questions if you'd like during the session. As I am probably on the most drab and boring end of the rainbow spectrum, being a straight cis male, I am going to leave today's session to the people who know what they're talking about. And in this case, we are being joined by Gregg Potter, who's the CEO and founder of Connect, and Shona Smith, who is the CEO and founder of Out Traveling. They're both going to be representing the LGBTQ plus community, and they would like to share their experiences about how that community travels and what it means for them. Gregg and Shona, the scene is yours.
Thank you so much. Well, first I'm going to send my WhatsApp number, and then it will come up again. We're going to have to try to be engaging as much as possible on this, but that's one way that you can. And I'm just going to share my screen. And there we go. Okay. So welcome. We're going to go a little bit tonight. Well, I'm coming to you from Cape Town, so it is definitely 9 o'clock at night. And we're going to talk a little bit about intentional travel in the LGBTQ spectrum. The first one is just say, who is me? Why am I here? I've done a lot of extensive work in the LGBTQ plus communities around the globe. Like I've worked with the Department of Home Affairs and the UN here in Cape Town before. I've done some work in Belize. I've been on the Los Angeles Gay and Lesbian Center Board of Directors. I am a travel addict, and I've done a lot of community engagement around the world. I do want to admit my blind spots because I don't represent all of the LGBTQ plus. I am a white cisgender gay man, and I'm American. Those two things will provide a lot of blind spots in my life, but we all need to acknowledge our blind spots so we can grow in that uncomfortability. So in any of this speech, in any of this conversation tonight, if your blind spots come up, just acknowledge them and lean into them. So sorry, the Kilroy group, if you want to throw my picture up here with this, I think you're able to do that, but I'm not sure. So what are we doing in this 45 minutes? Well, we are going to take inventory about who is showing up for this conversation and why they think it is important. We're going to examine what current challenges LGBTQ plus travelers are experiencing and what resources are out there to support their work. And we're going to illustrate what international travel means and what it looks like in the LGBTQ plus communities around the globe. This is a conversation. What does that mean? That means do not be afraid to offer any questions that are added input. You can put it in the chat. You can WhatsApp me. This conversation doesn't end here. This is just the beginning of a very important conversation. Feel free to connect with one another. If you are vulnerable enough and you're brave enough, you can throw your email or your social media handles out there. And like I said, feel free to WhatsApp me or email me after this is over and we can continue this conversation. So first, I want to know in the chat, who is joining us from where? Where are
some poll results we can put up? No poll results yet?
No, but in the chat, if anyone wants to share where you are coming from tonight. I'm asking these questions mostly because if I need to pivot this conversation, I want to do so we are making the most impact on this.
So guys, if you feel confident sharing that in chat, feel free to post the location you're joining us from, whether that be a country or a city.
Copenhagen, Sweden, Norway, Netherlands. I'll just sing it all. Oh my gosh. Oh, Tosh, hello. We've got a fellow out traveler, Shona's business partner. Finland, awesome. That's fantastic. I mean, we're Europe hard, but let's go for it. So, All right, now let's go to, and you can continue adding in where you're from. I really appreciate this. Now, if we can go to the first poll question of what is it? Do you identify with any of the letters in the LGBTQ plus acronym? Just yes or no. Do you fall in there? Because if this is mostly straight cisgender group, then I want to have that switch. But if this is a strongly LGBTQ plus, then let's continue with the framing that we built this as. Yes, yes.
So far we have 60% yes and 40%, well, 70% yes and 30% no.
Awesome. I mean, it's awesome either way. There's no wrong answer in this.
There is no wrong answer.
I just want to make sure you know this. Okay, and thank you so much, Kilroy team, for helping me with this. And then the last question in this poll is, do you intend on traveling internationally in the next 12 months?
Yeah.
That's
like
the next
personally,
yes.
Personally, I can tell you that I plan on traveling if my kids allow me, or if circumstances allow it. Now, obviously, the past month has been, or the past year has been very complicated for everybody. So I certainly hope that most people say yes, because I think the way that we get the world back on track is if people start traveling again, visiting local communities and societies, and investing in them that way. We've definitely been starved of travel opportunities for a very long time, but it seems like the poll numbers are in the favor of
yes. I love this, because this is where this conversation really has its most power, is how do we turn that travel in the next 12 months into intentional and meaningful travel that's not just serving us, but it's serving who we're traveling to. So, yay, a little pseudo shimmy for the evening. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. When I share the screen, do you see me and the screen? Sorry, I'm asking.
Yes, when you share the screen, we see what you're sharing and yourself as well.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so why are you here? Now I know I'm keep asking questions, but why are you here? And now give a little bit more than a 1 or 2 word answer. I would like to know, really, why is this important to you? Why did you show up at 8 o'clock at night, at 9 o'clock at night, to listen to some gay man from Wisconsin, USA, talk to you about travel? So
that's a very interesting question to pose, Greg. I'm really looking forward to seeing what people reply to that one. Primarily, I'm here because this is my job. I don't think that was the answer you're looking for.
No, there's nothing wrong with that. The honesty is fantastic. So, but this is a conversation, and to understand more, thank you, Robert. I really appreciate that. This is my passion. I'm probably going to say your name wrong, but Hanu, that's amazing. Thank you for just throwing it out there, because, like I said, I'm a travel addict. I can't stay still. How to raise awareness, spread love, how to support. Thank you, Kai. I'm going to wait for a couple more answers to come through, because I just think this is valuable. Even if you're not answering, still you're thinking about it. And that's still a conversation, even though it's just in our head. That's still a conversation we'll have. So I love traveling. I love meeting up with new people, and Kilroy is great too. Yes, it is. I want to be more aware of how to support LGBTQ plus. 2 gay women planning the world trip. Yes, Eva. Oh my gosh, you're in the right place. When Shona comes on, yes, you're totally in the right place. Okay. So I'm going to keep going because we only have 45 minutes. So challenges of travel as an LGBTQ plus person. First, I want to chat a little bit about me with my experience. The first time that I worked internationally in community engagement work, it was in Belize, and it was in the Anglican church. And I had to go up with a lot of barriers with being authentically myself and not knowing how to come out in that work and in that travel. And then at that time, Belize still had a law against sodomy, so it was very tricky. And then I came to South Africa, and I was working with the Methodist Church in downtown Johannesburg for a while, and that also was difficult because the Methodist Church in South Africa tends to be very conservative. But then that flipped around because I started working with the UN and assessing the Department of Home Affairs' ability to grant asylum to LGBT refugees. So I've been able to see the gambit a little bit. I'd love for everyone, if you've traveled and you've had an obstacle, please share your obstacle with us. Because this is, for anyone who has not had to face this challenge, it's good to hear stories. And also, if anyone who hasn't comes across this, I want them to know that they're in a community that other people have. So feel free to share in that. I'm going to come back to that in a few minutes. And then I sent out, Shona and I put together a resource guide. And so I sent that out as a handout. And you'll be getting an email afterwards with all these resources. Many of them might be very familiar to you, but there's some other ones in there that really are unique. And in this, feel free in the chat to also add other resources or WhatsApp me, just in case. That's even better for you. But some of the general resources that we've come across is travelstate.gov. I mean, that's obviously a US resource, but it covers everything. And then in the guide, we've also got a couple other government resources. And then I put in the 1951 UN Refugee Law Protocol, because I think it's really interesting when we start talking about refugees and migration and how people are moving. It can be a powerful tool when we need to get active when we need to be allies and be advocates for people who are in different positions than we are. We also have some other NGO resources in there: the Human Dignity Trust, Global Citizen, and Equalidex. I'm going to have Shona come in here for just a moment, and I want you to talk about Equalidex because she's used it a lot for her organization that we'll talk about in a minute.
Hi, Shona.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Greg. Brief introduction into Equaldex. I think the URL is on the resource guide. What they do, which is quite amazing, and when traveling as LGBTQ, there's a big difference between legal norms within a country or destination and social acceptance. And this can be evidenced in, a lot of times, governments can be quite progressive, but the people are still fairly conservative. Or you've got a very progressive people and governments that are slow to take action. So what Equaldex is really interesting for is they will give you a very quick summary on legalities. What is legal, what is illegal, what is punishable, what is not punishable. But then they also rank social accepted norms. So they've taken polls throughout the country, and you can get a sense or a feeling on what the public thinks about LGBTQ, how they accept it, how free you are to act with authenticity within the destination that you're visiting. I think as a little side note, it's always important to recognize that these are country specific and it can always vary from city to city, town to town. So a metropolitan city will be vastly different to visiting a rural country village. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. It's an amazing resource that I keep learning more about, but I wanted Shona to share about that. So you can stay in here because I'm going to, even though I didn't appropriately introduce her yet, which I'm about to. So here's the first big part of this conversation is, should we travel to countries that there are laws against LGBTQ plus people? And this is a moral conversation of, yes, we can, and we're going to, by going there, we're going to show different LGBTQ people from across the globe. We are going to advocate for the people that live in that country, and we're going to put money into that country from our pockets, which, yes or no, has pros and cons to it. Also, there's the idea of how do we find our comfortability in doing this travel, and where is our comfort zone, and how do we stretch it? So, hello, David from Chicago. Sorry, just had to throw that. I'm from very close to Chicago. Anyway, so how do we stretch it? So, I was always very nervous about traveling to these countries, even after my experience in Belize and South Africa, which are not that harsh on laws. I mean, South Africa is technically has the most equitable constitution in the entire globe, and it was the fourth country to legalize gay marriage. But despite that, there are still towns and communities around South Africa and in the U.S. that, I mean, it's you cannot travel as a trans person. Uh, you cannot be a lesbian. I mean, once a week, once a month, once you stay in this country, there is a story uh, about rape violence and corrective rape violence to lesbians. So there's that weird balance. Even to males. So, but then one time I traveled to Uganda to visit my friend Kathleen, and she's like, you've got to meet some people that I absolutely love, and we're going to go to an underground party, and I promise you're not going to get arrested. And I was like, what are you talking about? And we went, and it was an underground LGBTQ party. I had such a great time, but I met this woman, Alumi. She's a lesbian, grew up outside of Kampala, and she and her Swedish girlfriend wanted to start a t-shirt company called Normal. And they wanted to sell this t-shirt in the US so that they could funnel money into underground LGBT organizations around Kampala. And I immediately said yes. If I didn't go to this party, and if I wasn't open to that, and I wasn't pushing my comfortability zone, that would have never have happened. And we funneled a bunch of money into that. That was one of my first projects, actually, is Project Connect. So, and I don't share this story to be like, well, this is the change you can do, but it's more about testing our comfortable zone and how far can we go it. In the chat, I would love to hear how you feel about this moral, yes or no, because this is a conversation. Do you feel that, yes, we should go spend money in these countries, or we should not? And this is other ways that we can advocate for the LGBTQ communities in those countries. You want to add anything to this?
I think travel is, we live in such a big, beautiful world. And as a member of LGBTQ, it's a shame that travel is sometimes restricted because you have to be aware of the legal considerations and, whether you're putting yourself at risk. But at the same time, the more that we as a community do travel, the more we expose people within those countries. It's very small impacts. We expose them to paradigms or stereotypes or belief systems that they may have grown up with. And if they have the opportunity to meet and engage with you, we create small impacts of change. We create conversation. And that's a way that every single traveler can actually have a very small impact wherever they go. And we can continue that.
Completely. So please, this is a great moment to ask questions and add that. Astrid, yes, purchasing power. It's crazy, especially from, I'm going to use very global development words, but the global north, we have a lot of purchasing power that we can use. Even some of us who aren't that wealthy still can do a lot with our little bit of money. Hanu, been thinking about this a lot. For example, never traveled to St. Petersburg, even though it's close by. Interesting. I don't know if I have the guts to go to Russia yet. I've not been there yet either. So my support is there, and Hanu, let me know. Maybe I'll go with you. Astrid, how do you balance being yourself while traveling but being safe? For me, it's that comfortability. Again, this is where one of my blind spots come in. I'm a cisgender white gay man. Even though I can get very gay, I have the ability and the what's the word I'm looking for? You know what I want.
You can pass.
Yeah, I can pass. Yeah, I have the privilege to pass, as opposed to this wonderful woman that I worked with when I was working at the UN. She came from Cameroon, and she was a transgender woman, and the Department of Home Affairs was like, "You're a woman now. You can go back." And she couldn't go back to Cameroon because in Cameroon she was a man. So yeah, David, I think purchasing power definitely has real effects. I know that here in the United States, it had effects on states that enact discriminating laws, conferences pulling out, companies relocating, and people moving. Oh, David, I was in California when Prop 8 got turned down, and I was right there in the middle of it. So yes, when companies start pulling out, it can really do some impactful things. How do we, and I don't think there's an answer to this evening, but how do we then challenge our larger companies in our nations that are present right now that have companies or have business in these other countries? How do we challenge them to do that? The first one that comes to mind for me is Walmart. Walmart is all over the southern part of the continental Africa. And how do we do that? Again, don't think we have an answer, but I think it's important that we're at least bringing it up tonight. And we are not in a space to get that deep and that heavy in 45 minutes. So do you have anything to add to this?
That's a very, very big question.
It's a huge question. So any other comments in there? Pipe in, and I'll keep checking this, but we're going to move on at the moment. Again, I'm going to reiterate this. Please add in anything in there. We will keep checking it. And then, yeah, and yes. That's my words, yes. So, okay, we're going to move on. All right, now we're going to really talk to Shona. I had the luxury of meeting Shona through my good friend James about a year ago when I started the LGBTQ Interchange. Shona, at the same time, was starting an organization called Queer AF. And I'm
sorry, can you just clarify what the AF stands for?
As fuck.
Thank you. Just making sure. Just making sure.
So definitely this is an Adult Swim type of conversation. So I'm not opposed to that at all.
It's a late night show. It's a late night show, so yeah. We're all right. We're good.
But honestly, if some of my keynotes at 2 p.m, the F word is come out sometimes. We're all adults. Anyway, so she started Queer AF then, and it grew really fast. The following was amazing. It was so fun to be a part of that, to watch it and to witness that. And then you started out traveling.
Yes.
And you brought in your 20 plus years of experience in the travel world. And as I hope it's okay that I said this, I should ask it, as a new out lesbian.
Go ahead. Yeah.
And you dove right in, you're conquering this. So and she's an outdoors person. She loves to surf and hike and just be outdoors. And we both love wine. We haven't had it before this, but we probably will after. And maybe that's what we met. We maybe had a glass of wine. But that's neither here nor there. So we're going to make this about Shona now. So I just want to ask her some questions. Okay, go. And we're gonna dive into what it is to really intentionally travel. And as we're talking about intentionally traveling, I would love you to add in your thoughts on what it means to you to intentionally travel, because it's a very important conversation on when 92% of people involved in this conversation right now are traveling in the next 12 months. Travel is a luxury that has so many community building and bridge building things that the most important thing about travel right now is doing it intentionally. So, Shona, okay, first, why did you start out traveling?
Okay, so I wrote some notes earlier, but actually I'm going to rephrase it a little bit and just refer back to Queer AF very quickly.
As fuck if you didn't get that before.
The name of the company, Queer AF, it's really about embracing yourself. So yes, queer is an umbrella term. It's a term that was reclaimed by the community. It represents power of knowledge of self, and it represents, yes, 80, 50 years ago, it was a term that was a slur. And it's saying, you know what, you can't shame me for who I am. Yes, I am. And I'm proud of it. Yes, I'm queer as fuck. That's who I am. And queer for me as well, something that I discovered along the way is specifically within the LGBT community. I think that there's an enormous amount of power within the LGBT community, that every single person within that space, we've all gone through some sort of life journey. We've all gone through, we all raised as kids. We've all gone through some period of questioning, of finding ourselves. For many, it was easy. For many, it was difficult. We all had different paths. Whatever the case, we've made a choice to live authentically. And for some of us, it's easier than others. Whoever you are, there's a choice to live authentically. So when it comes to traveling, and obviously my background is travel, I've been in travel for all my life. I think actually it started when I was 6. My mom in the 80s would put up those little screen projectors and show me pictures of her skiing trips. But yeah, travel for me, it has the power to change you. When you go to a new destination, especially if you travel to a destination that's so different from your own. If you live in the West and you travel to the East, or you live in the East and you go to Europe, even if you live in South Africa, which is a fairly Western society, and you travel to Europe, there's different cultural norms, there's different ways of life. You begin to understand that it doesn't matter who you are or where you were born or how you were brought up. People are people are people are people. And wherever you go, people have dreams and hopes and aspirations and challenges and struggles. And we just take life a little bit differently. So travel, I think, has the power to change. It has the power to show you who you are. There's a saying, travel far enough so you can find yourself. And I think that's amazing. I mean, that applies to every single person that travels, regardless of how you identify. But when it comes to the LGBT community, it's even more profound. And in my background, previously we dealt with a very standard, stereotypical client base. And one of the things I noticed as a LGBT person inquiring about travel, there's a lot of considerations you need to be aware of. And sometimes it's simple, like, can I hold my girlfriend's hand when I'm walking down the street? Am I going to check into the hotel and have all these awkward questions about having a double bed? Do I have to move the beds together in the middle of the night, after housekeeping has been?
Sorry, I'm just thinking of a time with one of my boyfriends that anyway, keep going, yeah.
Travel should be seamless. It should be a space of gratitude. It should be a place of awesomeness, of memories, of it just should be special. And there's these little things that can disrupt travel. And when you talk about the umbrella of LGBTQ plus and specifically trans, they have a whole other set of complications. I mean, if you are traveling on a Middle East airline that's transiting through the Middle East, do you need to be aware of what it means to be traveling as a trans woman and identified on your passport as male? Is this going to create hurdles? Is this going to create discomfort? So creating a space where we can essentially act with discretion, act with peace of mind, and enable, I don't ever want people to feel restricted. So if you want to go to Russia, I believe you should be able to go to Russia, but it's all about knowing before you go. You, unfortunately, don't always have the freedom to be authentic in the destination that you're visiting. If you have the knowledge and you have the awareness, you can still experience the amazingness of the world that we live in, and the different experiences that it presents.
Completely. Oh,
Yeah.
that was
a long answer.
That was well said, though. That was so well said. And that was a perfect segue, because I acknowledge what Kai put in here. Is Russia's a cool place. Been there once. I recommend checking the cultural differences first. For example, personal space. People are nice, but it's a little gamble in regards to LGBTQ plus things, of course. But thank you for Kai for at least saying let's go. How would you define intentional travel? And then why is it important?
So for me, intentional travel is about really living, breathing, thinking about where you're going. You know, if you are going to Thailand, for example, be conscious and aware of the local culture, eat the street food, get to know the locals, learn a couple of words, you know, one or two. Don't restrict yourself by always staying in the same sort of popular cities. You know, get out into the country. Some things will it'll blow your mind. It'll shape your space. So intentional travel is really thinking about what you want to do in the destination, where you want to go, what you want to experience. And if what you want to experience is going to sit on the beach and drink cocktails, then awesome, let's plan around that, you know, that's cool. But maybe there's a beach on an island that is going to be away from 1,000 other tourists, and you are just going to absolutely live your dream. So I think that's, for me, what intentional travel is. It's immersing yourself in what that destination has to offer. And when it comes to LGBTQ, again, it's super important, because if you are going to follow intentional travel, you need to be aware that, again, so for example, in Bangkok, being LGBTQ is going to be largely accepted. You're going to be absolutely fine. There's nightclubs, there's everything. But if you are going to go into the remote villages, if you are going to go into the north, Thais by nature are very conservative. And it's not necessarily LGBTQ or straight, they are conservative by nature. So public displays of affection, you should be respectful of the local culture, because if you are really wanting to understand the local culture, you shouldn't necessarily piss them off. And regardless, you know, as a straight person, if you go into a temple in Thailand, you should cover your shoulders and your knees. It's very basic principles about understanding what they consider to be respectful.
I love that, because that's, for me, that's a really good starting point. Is the culture, and then once we have that in our toolbox, then we can start making baby steps with the relationships. Because really, it's, for me, it's the intentional travel. For me, is the relationships and being intentional about who I'm speaking to, why I'm there. Is it authentic? Is it genuine? And are we both benefiting from this conversation? You know, whether it's a tour guide, it's a front desk clerk, or it's an orphanage that you're going to help out on one day because you have some extra time, or however that is, that those relationships, for me, is the leaning in part. Like, it's okay, now what are the relationships? And do they just stop there with the travel, or do they continue after you leave your destination? So
that's the most incredible part, like coming back to what I said earlier with the impact that we as LGBT travelers can make. When you can understand the local cultural norms, and you can act with respect within it, you can open up conversation and you can engage. And I mean, I've got friends from all over the world that I maybe met once, but you follow them on Facebook, and you know, and they get to know you as a human being, and they grew up in a vastly different environment. They see that maybe some of the perceptions they had are not right. Like, maybe you're just the same as me.
Right. And there's something unique too that happens, and please share this if this has happened to any of you listening and watching, is when someone finds out, when you do come out, the proverbial come out, to someone, like with, I mentioned the church, the Methodist church, when I finally had the courage to say, hey, you love me so much, but we've created these relationships after 4 months, but if you really want, I'm going to show up authentically, and you want to know me, you have to know that I am a gay man. And then after that, you know, and of course there's love. Usually there's love because there's already commonality and there's appreciation that comes with that. And then what's next, you know, and for me, that's often, well, you know, this person in this country, you know, there was a volunteer that always would come down to help us out for soup nights on Wednesday nights. And, you know this person, she's a lesbian. How, like, do you have the same appreciation and love for her, or is there a difference there? Is there a double standard? And so it's, you know, hopefully if you have the connection, if you have the relationship, that we can dive into that next step. And I know this is a very heavy thing. This is a very heavy conversation, but I think that it's good at least to think about it. And there's no answers this evening, but we're at least thinking about it. So Do you have anything to add on to that before I ask the next question?
Sure, not right now.
Okay.
I'll jump in though if I think.
Okay. And again, please continue adding comments into this. All right. What is your personal vision for the impact of what is your personal vision that LGBTQ plus travel will make?
Okay.
And out traveling, of course.
Yeah. No, thank you very much for asking the question. I think it's a great question, and it's something that we have built everything that we've done on, actually. It's about creating safe space. It's about creating the ability to be yourself. Something that you said earlier, like if you are hiding a part of yourself, if you're not being authentic, you are not able to give of yourself in every way that you can. Because you're hiding a part of yourself. You're building walls. So the idea is to break down walls. And without traveling, I think it's important for us that we continue to open a door to travel. We continue to open a door to safe spaces. We put the choice into the customer's hands. But we're there to guide. We're there to offer advice. We're there to offer assistance. And yeah, sorry, excuse me, I'm reading from my notes very quickly. Our traveling, what we would like to do in the future, and it's at the moment we're involved in a very small space with this, but ideally going forwards, as a company, it's also our responsibility to get involved in projects. And based in South Africa, we're based in South Africa. We have representatives in the States, in the UK, but our head office is here in Cape Town. And exactly what you said earlier, like South Africa is one of the freest constitutions in the world, and yet we have communities that are still practicing hate crime. And there's a lot of NGOs, NPOs here in South Africa, across the continent of Africa, that are working really hard to assist LGBTQ who suffer persecution. And I think it's our corporate responsibility. I think it's our responsibility as a member of the community to really start to enable awareness and funding into those projects. Ideally, in the future, you'll see us supporting projects across different continents. That would be the vision. We're not there yet, I'll be honest, but it's definitely the vision.
You're getting there.
No, it's a passion. It's definitely a passion. I mean, I think it's I haven't been out. Yeah, so personally, I've been out for like 2 years now, but I think because I came out a little bit older, I'm incredibly aware of how to not live true to yourself affects every single part of your being. It affects your relationships, your family life, your dynamics, your company, your work, and when you can break down those barriers, when you can break down those walls, when you can say, yes, here I am as queer as fuck, and take it or leave it, because this is me, suddenly there's a whole lot of freedom. And that there are so many people in so many countries all over the world who don't have the freedom to be themselves. It's limiting on their potential. It's limiting on their ability to engage. It's limiting on their ability to perform at their utmost, because they're always behind a wall. So yes, I think we're also working, creating safe spaces. We are engaged on social media. We do have a private group that has, we've got, I think, about 7,000 people now from over 122 countries. And we're creating conversation, we're creating a safe space, a support system, a lot of humor. And it's great, because if you are living in Afghanistan, for example, and we've got quite a few members from countries where it is really punishable by death, there's a space there that they can feel a part of the community, that at least they can be themselves there. And if we can continue to grow that, that'll also, I think, that's steps in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. And that's interesting too with those types of groups is the idea of what are, the intentional travel of what if you make a friend and you're like, and you sponsor them to come to you, that's still intentional travel. It just might not be me personally traveling. It's just something interesting. As I ask this next question, I would love, please share your thoughts on what you define intentional traveling as. And then also the last question I'm going to ask Shona is, where have you seen intentional travel in the LGBTQ space successful? The first thing that the example that I think of the Philippines, and I think of Thailand. And like perfect example is Thailand. with how it was travelers and the ladyboys. I mean, that's what they're, they're the ones that started the condom cafes, and that's like, what an amazing case study. So where have you seen, again, first question, how do you define intentional travel? And then where have you seen it it working well in the LGBT communities and the LGBTQ plus space? Do you have any examples of where you've seen it working successfully?
Well, I don't know. I would actually love to reference your trip coming to South Africa next year, April, because what you're putting together with the South African and LGBTQ Interchange, it's phenomenal. I mean, people who are going to be joining that trip, they are not only seeing an incredible country, I have a lot of love for South Africa, but they are meeting people who are change makers across the country, which means that if you are traveling from Europe or the States, you are engaging with LGBT individuals within South Africa who are really making waves of change. You're talking, you're engaging, you're discussing, and you're walking away with a feeling of empowerment. So I would love to reference that.
Thank
I think
you.
that's amazing.
What Shona's referencing, and I didn't do any plugs about this because that's not really why I'm here tonight, but the LGBTQ plus interchange is the idea of how do we add to our transformational leadership skills while looking at the intersectionality in the LGBTQ space. And while we're in South Africa for 2 weeks, we'll be meeting everyone from politicians to grassroots organizers to tour guides to fashion designers to media people, all in the LGBTQ plus space. My personal favorite is in East London. There is a group that focuses on trans sex workers, and that conversation is going to be phenomenal for anyone who's able to make it. So anyway, just looking to see if anyone added any of theirs. Did we lose everyone or? Anyway,
maybe people just went a bit quiet because it's been a fascinating conversation to be privy to.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So,
you're welcome.
And that's it. And Mike in Chicago, this is from Saugatuck, Michigan, so you probably know where that is. Anyway, Saugatuck, Michigan, for all of you who don't have any clue, it's this like weird gay mecca in the middle of the Midwest that's just packed in the summer. So anyway, that's.
I have a kind of a comment or a question because all right, so I'm fairly privileged being a cisgendered white male, and I feel that I know my privilege, but I think that a lot of what you guys have spoken about, and then knowing other people of the LGBTQ plus community, is that there's certain parallels that run through. Obviously, my struggles are nowhere near can be near as arduous as theirs, but it's funny with Shona, talking about this, like when you go somewhere, can you hold hands with somebody, or can you can you be your true self? And I'm married to an Iranian woman, and so we've been to Iran, and in Iran there's a very specific sort of social construct where if you're not married, then you're not anything. You can't. There's no such thing as a public display of affection, and there's no such thing as being in a relationship unless you're married. And I remember this. Was it you, Greg, who said this whole thing about putting the beds together? And it was sort of a similar situation where it was we couldn't be in a room together because we weren't married, so we had to order 2 separate rooms when we were staying in hotels. And I think the magic of travel, to sort of get to my point, is that if we push our own boundaries, regardless of which group we associate with, we can also start identifying much more with each other, because that sort of experience, of being of not feeling that you can be yourself. If you experience that, and then an LGBTQ plus person tells you that that's how they feel a lot of places, then you suddenly have a reference point of how that would feel if you were in their shoes, and that just gives you an ability to identify with them in a much higher level than just not having pushed your own boundaries and just being able to travel freely and act how you want based on which grouping you belong. So I think that's like sort of like magic of travel, is that while I'm not an LGBTQ plus person, I can definitely associate with some of those challenges because I've experienced them just in a different context.
100%. Amazing.
Yeah.
Completely. I want to reference David's question. In terms of intentional travel, how do you go about finding communities that might know on the ground information and places you might be interested in? Well, my first example is you're going to die, everyone. It's Grindr, actually. When I'm doing international work for this nonprofit that I work for, Peace Work, and I can't find a community partner, I get on Grindr and I can find them. Like, seriously, in St. Lucia one time, I needed to find the Minister of Education, and I found them in 30 minutes. I'm just like, hey, anyone knows? So the reason I bring this up is we never know how we're going to really find out. The internet, I mean, obviously we can search anything. But we get to be creative in the space, and that's really why I bring this up, because you don't, you could be talking to your server at a restaurant that you're at. You could, you could just notice that something's out of place, or that, where our homeless group meeting, or, I mean, it's just being very present in the space that you're in, but then also doing the work, as Shona said earlier, making sure you know what the culture is, making sure what any norms, knowing a few words, going in there as prepared as possible. So then you also feel, the more comfortable you feel in an uncomfortable space, the more susceptible you'll be to finding those communities and how to get involved in that way. And of course, I can only speak from my lived experience. Every one of us is different, and we're going to take different strides in this. And so I just encourage and love everyone for even being a part of this conversation to have that. So, do you have anything to add to that, or does anyone have any more questions? Thank you for giggling, Robert and Astrid. I appreciate it. So
I was going to say, Greg, you're probably the only person on Grindr looking for political connections.
You have some of my closest friends in some of these countries have happened because of anyway. At least we all know what Grindr is. Male dating.
All right. Good to know.
So, again, this is Kilroy After Dark. So
yeah, this is definitely Kilroy After Dark. Let me see if we have any more questions. No more questions as far as I can see in chat.
Well,
do you guys have any finishing thoughts on before we sign off for tonight?
From my side, I just want to say really thank you, and also thank you to Kilroy for opening up this conversation, because it really is so important to be talking about it. And your story about Iran and how you can, I have a straight cis white male friend. He's one of my best friends, and I've talked to him so many times, and he's like, that thought never occurred to me. It's just not something in my horizon, but now I totally get it. So opening up that space where you can have these conversations, because when you're not exposed to it, you don't necessarily think about it. So thank you to you for opening that up.
My pleasure. It was, I think that it's important to realize that we as a community have both power abroad. This is something that you both touched upon that I just want to sort of wrap in a bow, is that you have both power abroad and at home, where you can influence both. You can do like the soft, waves upon a beach that slowly removes the rocks, which is when you go out traveling and then you just slowly introduce your culture to people. But then at home, you also have the power to influence. By being a voice for your community, you have the power to influence local politicians, and then they interact on a macro level with other politicians. And so, if you're afraid to travel, you can start that journey at home, closer to home, by influencing the local politics, which will influence the broader broader politics your country takes as a stance. And then if you then, once you gather the courage, and I understand it takes a lot of courage, then you can slowly start to break down those personal barriers when you meet people where they are, and then you just show them, as you said, showing that people are people are people are people. That's something that I've always realized, is that in the end we're all the same. We all want, security, safety, just to be happy and live our fullest lives, and that's like the most groundbreaking thing that we can introduce each other to, that concept that no matter that we are black, white, gay, straight, whatever, in the end we're like all come from the same space and just want the same things in life. So
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really happy that you guys came and talked about this, because I think it's a very important topic to talk about, and to break down these barriers, to introduce what it actually means and these challenges that there are, and the way that we can support the LGBTQ plus community in their pursuit of happiness, so to speak.
Can I echo one thing that you just said, that I just want to say it again in another way, is the reminder of when we're traveling intentionally, that's also changing our community at home. Like,
Yeah.
bottom line, like, we're changing, and so we're gonna change what's happening in our home space. So I just hope that I just want everyone to just love their space and move around as intentionally and curious as they can. And please reach out to either one of us. I mean, we're here. This is what I love to do. So
All right, cool.
it gets me away from dealing with my clients back in the States.
All right, well, you guys heard it. If you need any help, or if you want to talk to them, I think both Shona and Greg have shared their contact details, so feel free to do that. As for us, this is the end of today's show. So my guests again, they were Gregg Potter and Shona Smith, joining us from the wonderful country of South Africa. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I hope you guys have broadened your horizons, because that was the plan for today. And we'll see you tomorrow when we rejoin. Thanks again, Greg. Thanks, Shona.
Thank
Bye.
you so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
You too.
Thank